When I first married Emily, everything seemed perfect. We were young, full of love, and from the outside, we looked like the ideal couple. But as time passed, cracks started to form, and I could no longer ignore them. At first, Emily appeared supportive as I worked long hours to secure a future for us, but soon, her behavior began to drain me. She started withdrawing large sums from our joint account without explanation, leaving me scrambling to make ends meet. When I confronted her, she would accuse me of not earning enough, making me feel like my efforts were always inadequate. The emotional toll was even heavier. She stopped caring about the things we used to enjoy together. Our date nights turned into empty obligations, and she spent most of her time in bed, claiming exhaustion. I stopped planning activities altogether as it felt pointless. The accusations she hurled at me cut even deeper. She claimed I was keeping our son from her, despite her evident lack of interest in spending time with him. It was as if I was always the problem, no matter what I did. The emotional distance between us grew with every passing day. Soon, Emily started spending nights away from home, claiming she was staying with friends. Whenever I asked about it, she would either shut me down or change the subject. My trust in her slowly evaporated, and the love I once had for her faded, replaced by growing resentment. I tried to shield our son from the tension, but even he could sense the strain. He was confused and hurt, and I felt powerless to fix it. I suggested couples therapy, but she showed no interest. She seemed perfectly content in her own world, a world that no longer had a place for me. That's when I realized our marriage was beyond repair. Eventually, Emily told me she was leaving for someone else. The news brought with it a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear of the unknown, and relief that the constant tension had finally come to an end. When she left, I realized how much I'd been holding on to something that had already slipped away. Our marriage had been emotionally dead for a while, and I had been too exhausted to accept it. The divorce process felt like a blur, surreal and unsettling, but a part of me was relieved. The weight of living in a broken marriage had finally been lifted. Yet, the unknowns of life after divorce were daunting. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I had to fight for my peace. The first obstacle came with the paperwork. Emily's lawyer made mistake after mistake. Incorrect names, wrong dates, even errors with our child's details. The process dragged on, but I began to see an opportunity. With each delay, I had more time to prepare for what lay ahead. Eventually, I spoke up about the incompetence of her lawyer, which worked in my favor. I avoided additional legal fees, which felt like a small win in a difficult situation. Finally, the divorce was finalized. Emily kept the house and gained custody of our son. She moved in with the man she had left me for, but I later discovered he was abusive. For the first time, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. But it didn't change the fact that she was gone, and I needed to focus on rebuilding my life. I took control of my finances after the divorce. I changed all my passwords and secured my accounts, determined to avoid any more surprises or financial mismanagement. I had learned from the mistakes of my marriage. Meanwhile, Emily was left to figure things out on her own. As hard as it was, I couldn't be the one to support her anymore. Life after the divorce was far from perfect, but it was a start, a fresh chapter. A year later, things were finally beginning to fall into place. I'd bought the house from Emily's uncle when she failed to keep up with the mortgage. At first, I had been hesitant, but it turned out to be a wise decision. Not only did it provide financial stability, but it also gave me the space I needed to rebuild. I focused on myself, exercising, losing weight, and even getting a promotion at work. I was rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. I started dating again, meeting new people, but I wasn't rushing into anything serious. I was enjoying the freedom, the sense of being myself again. Life was improving, step by step, and I felt like I was moving in the right direction. But just when I thought I had moved on, Emily reappeared. One evening, I received a message from her. My heart sank when I saw her name on the screen. It had been so long, and I had worked so hard to move on, yet there she was, forcing her way back into my life. "Brad, can we talk?" the message read. The simplicity of it didn't match the weight it carried. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of her intentions, before replying. "What do you need, Emily?" I typed back, trying to keep my emotions in check. She responded almost immediately, asking if we could meet in person. At first, I told myself I wasn't going to entertain her manipulations anymore, but something inside me, something deep, something that hadn't fully let go of the past, nudged me to agree. I wanted closure. I wanted to hear her side of things. When we met the next day at a cafe, she looked different. She had lost some weight, and there was a softness to her eyes, a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. She greeted me with a tentative smile, as though testing the waters. The woman who once seemed so hard, so distant, now appeared fragile, and for a moment, I wondered if I could ever truly let go. "Brad," she spoke, her voice softer than I remembered. I nodded, fighting the urge to lower my guard. "Hi, Emily. What's going on?" Her smile faltered, and she sat down across from me, her posture shifting into something almost vulnerable. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what happened," she said, her eyes searching mine for some hint that I might still care. "I know things ended badly, but I think we can work it out. I've changed, Brad. I want us to raise our child together, and I think we should try again for the sake of the family." Her words landed like a punch to the gut, but it wasn't because I hadn't thought about reconciliation. It was because, somewhere along the way, I had already moved on. I had spent so many nights grieving the loss of us, lost in a storm of emotions, and now, finally, I had found some semblance of peace. The thought of going back to that chaos, of reopening old wounds, felt like a betrayal to the progress I'd made. I looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment, I realized that nothing had changed. She was still the same person who had hurt me, who had lied, who had betrayed me. She was still the same woman who had pushed me to the brink of breaking. The only difference now was that she was trying to manipulate me with guilt, pretending she had turned over a new leaf, but I saw through it. Her motivations were anything but pure. "Emily," I said, my voice firm but calm, "I've moved on. I'm not interested in getting back together. What we had is over, and I'm okay with that." Her face fell, but she wasn't finished. "I don't think you understand," she pressed, her voice laced with desperation. "I'm not asking for much, just for us to be a family again. I'll even pay you back the money I owe you if we try to make this work. Isn't that worth it?" I couldn't believe my ears. She was offering me money like some kind of bribe to fix everything, to erase the past as though it was a simple transaction, as if I could be bought. "This isn't about money," I replied, shaking my head. "This is about the way you hurt me. You lied, you cheated, you took everything from me. And now, you want to waltz back into my life like nothing happened? No, I won't be a part of your game anymore." Her eyes darkened, a mix of frustration and hurt flashing across her face. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself, but I wasn't moved. I had been weak once, but not anymore. I had allowed myself to be manipulated for far too long, and I wasn't about to fall into the same trap again. She tried to push me further, bringing up all the things we could fix together, but I stood my ground. "No, Emily," I said firmly. "This is over, and if you really care about our child, you need to stop using me as your emotional crutch. I am not the solution to whatever problems you're facing." With those words, I stood up, a sense of finality settling over me. It wasn't easy, but I walked away, leaving her there to deal with the consequences of her actions. I thought that meeting with Emily would be the end of it, that she would accept that I had moved on and let go. But Emily wasn't one to give up easily. For the next few weeks, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, bracing myself for the next time she would try to manipulate me, to play the victim. But what surprised me most was her silence. No more calls, no more messages. It was as if, For the first time, she had accepted that I wouldn't cave to her demands. Meanwhile, I was moving forward, slowly but surely. Rebuilding myself after the trauma of a divorce was more exhausting than anyone could have prepared me for, but I was doing it. I was taking back control of my life, and part of that meant putting myself back out there. Even though it felt like a huge risk, I was ready for the next chapter. That's when I met Michelle. We were introduced through mutual friends at a gathering one evening. She had a warmth about her, a sense of humor that immediately made me feel comfortable. There was something easy about talking to her. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about the past or the heartbreak I'd endured. I was just in the present, enjoying the connection we were building. Michelle wasn't looking to rush things, but her presence gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, I could open my heart again. I never wanted anything complicated, just someone to spend time with, share a few laughs, and enjoy life. At first, I wondered if I was rushing into something, but there was an undeniable feeling about Michelle. She was nothing like Emily. She didn't come with emotional baggage she wanted to unload, nor did she expect anything from me. It was just a simple, genuine connection. We started seeing each other regularly. It wasn't serious at first. I wasn't ready for that, but as time passed, I began looking forward to our moments together. We took weekend trips, explored new restaurants, and spent hours talking about everything and nothing at all. I hadn't realized how much I had missed true companionship until Michelle came into my life. But, of course, Emily couldn't stay away forever. One Saturday afternoon, I received the first message from her. I had just returned from a hike with Michelle and was settling down to relax when my phone buzzed. The moment I saw the number, I knew exactly who it was. Emily. Brad, I see you've moved on. Are you happy now? Is she making you happy? The message felt cold, but there was no mistaking the bitterness in her words. I stared at the screen for a moment, the old resentment bubbling up. I could almost feel her jealousy and need for control seeping through the words. It was maddening, but this time, I wasn't the same person I used to be. I had changed. I showed the message to Michelle, who was unwavering in her support. You don't owe her anything, she said, squeezing my hand gently. You've worked hard to get here. Don't let her pull you back into her mess. Michelle's words rang true, and I knew she was right. Instead of responding with anger or frustration, I simply blocked Emily's number. I wasn't about to let her disrupt the peace I had fought so hard to build. But things didn't stop there. The following week, Emily escalated things further. It was early Monday morning when I heard a knock at the door. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee and trying to enjoy a peaceful morning when I heard it. At first, I thought it was nothing, but when I opened the door and saw her standing there, my heart sank. What do you want, Emily? I asked, my voice flat. She wasted no time. I've seen you with her, she said sharply. I know what you're doing. You think you can just forget about me and move on with someone else, don't you? I tried to stay calm, but the old anger started creeping back. Emily, we're done. I've moved on. I don't owe you an explanation, and I certainly don't owe you an apology. She stepped closer, as though her proximity might make me reconsider. You're not the person I thought you were, Brad. You used to love me. I shook my head, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions. What I used to feel doesn't matter anymore. The person you were back then isn't who you are now. You lied. You cheated. You destroyed everything we had. There's nothing left to save. The silence that followed was heavy. I half expected her to break down, for tears to fall, but they never came. Instead, she stood there, her expression hardening. I hope you know what you're doing, Brad, she said quietly, her voice laced with venom. You'll regret this. With that, she turned and walked away without looking back. I closed the door behind me, leaning against it as I felt the weight lift from my chest. I had been ready for this moment, but that didn't make it easier to deal with. I didn't talk about it, not wanting to give Emily the satisfaction of knowing how much it had affected me. Michelle knew, Of course. When I told her, she simply held me, offering the comfort of her presence. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. And in that moment, I knew she was right. After Emily's visit, I felt a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted. Healing wasn't immediate, but with Michelle by my side, everything felt different. There was no manipulation, just a real connection. Looking back on my time with Emily, I realized how much I had sacrificed my own happiness in an attempt to fix something that was beyond saving. Walking away had been the best decision I'd ever made. I asked Michelle to move in with me, into the house I once shared with Emily. It felt symbolic, a new beginning. Michelle was supportive, and together, we made it our own. One evening, she said, "You're finally where you belong." She was right. I had let go of the past, and with Michelle, I was building something real. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Emily continued to try to contact me, but I made it clear that I wasn't going to engage. I set boundaries, knowing that her problems were no longer mine to fix. Michelle's unwavering support reminded me just how far I had come. "You've really changed," she said one evening, and I smiled. I agreed. I've learned to take control of my own happiness. With Michelle by my side, I felt at peace. The past no longer defined me, and I was finally ready to embrace whatever the future held.